I'll make it happen.
Because even if it's just like part of my head,
My father-in-law has a border feed. Yeah, I was over in Texas, so I was saying he's not like that, but he is a border. I think that's like he's real cheap. Does he see you or whatever? It's like, yeah.
I got facial recognition.
Expired.
that's good enough. All right, it's 9:30, so I'll go ahead and get started here. It is so cold in this room. So at least you won't fall asleep, which is good, I guess. I don't fall asleep. Man. So how many people have used Require.js in here? Anybody like actually use it? Oh wow, cool. That's actually exciting to me because the first half of this talk, it's actually more like 60% of it, is just kind of an intro to using Require.js and then a little bit on how to use it with MVC. So that's really good to know. All right, my name is Jonathan Kramer. I am jquery8 on Twitter, and I'm currently a JavaScript engineer with a Pin 2. In case you don't know who we are, we do all front-end development, so I use Require.js quite often, sticking almost entirely in the browser, which is pretty cool. It's a different shift. I started out in Cold Fusion several years ago, and I got into ASP.NET MVC, which was my only exposure actually to .NET, which is kind of cool. I don't have the emotional baggage that some of the web forms guys here have, which is nice. I got to just kind of jump right into the MVC thing and just doing JavaScript, so that's really cool. I do a lot of blogging. I write for NetTuts, and then this new company called Tech Pro. They're really cool. If you haven't ever seen Tech, it's just tech.pro, and they're like trying to be kind of a LinkedIn just for developers. LinkedIn, blogging, Hacker News, all in one space. It's really neat. I also fresh brewed code. I have a blog at jonathancreamer.com, and I'm also an IE user agent. Going to just talk about web standards and general modern webish things. And then that's a link about.me/jquery898 to see all of my links. So on the agenda today is I want to talk about just some traditional JavaScript issues. They're not necessarily like problems, but just some things that you have to deal with when you're working with JavaScript. And then talk about how AMD, which stands for asynchronous module definition, that's what Require.js is built off of. Talk about how that kind of solves some of those problems. And then I've got two projects that demonstrate single and multi-page apps. This is hilarious to me. Things like just going off over here. Okay. So, some issues in traditional JavaScript. One of the big kind of trends in JavaScript today is that you've got these humongous apps that you're just getting large JavaScript. They're just ginormous now, right? So you're dealing with huge Gmail, big applications. And what that ends up leading you to is some maintainability issues. You've got files going all over the place. You've got dependency things you got to worry about. What's the word I'm looking for on the next slide? Dependency management. So you've got all these things going on, and it gets really difficult to maintain them because they're just much, much bigger than they ever used to be. And then dependency management, basically out of the box with JavaScript, is done with nothing but script tags, which kind of sucks because if you accidentally have them like out of order, for example here, this is in the right order, but if you accidentally put backbone and then underscore, you'd have all kinds of errors in your browser, and you spend 5 minutes debugging, and then you hit your face on the desk and realize that you just had your script out of order because underscore is actually a dependency of backbone. So in order for it to work, they have to be loaded in one right after the other. So that's just really, really annoying. And then you've got things like concatenation and minification that you have to worry about because if you're loading all your script tags, you've got them all, just all these HTTP requests coming in, and they're taking up a lot of space. You see the network graphs where you'll have lots and lots of kilobytes coming down. So you've got to figure out how to concat and minify. But then with this dependency problem, if you're concatenating all these files, you got to go back in your HTML file and replace the script tags. It's kind of an annoying thing to have to do. Another problem with traditional JavaScript is global variables. If you're not familiar with global variables, the way that JavaScript kind of works is if you have script A and you put it in your page, if you just say var some variable and assign it, you've basically just said window.variable equals something. And that is available in every JavaScript file that you load after it, which is a huge fail, because if some third-party library also happens to use some variable, you're going to override it and have debugging nightmares. I've had this happen to me. Oh my goodness. We had, which is kind of a fail anyway, but we used had a site ID, and somebody decided to go with S as our site ID in our site. So they said var S equals and then some ID. And then we had some third-party library that it was a content management system, so they just threw a third-party library in there. They also used S, and we used S all throughout our code. So like this person's website was completely borked, and it was just because of a global variable where there was some collision going on. It doesn't happen very often, but it's just a situation that you'll find yourself in that you have to be really careful about. So it's just a bad practice too, to use the global. There's a lot of patterns you can use that I'll kind of show some, but Require.js helps solve some of these problems. So globals are the devil, don't use them. It's a very, very bad practice, and you just don't want to do it. Another big problem with JavaScript is occasionally you'll get into a situation where you just start writing JavaScript, and you start writing and you keep writing, and it's all in one file. I've had this happen where I've worked with a client, and I go and I open their JavaScript code, and there are just 10,000, literally, this happened to me, 10,000 lines of JavaScript code in a single file. And not minified, you know, just in 2 spaces too, which was just miserable for me to have to read. Big JavaScript kills kittens and puppies, so it's just not fun to work with. So the better way to do it is to use smaller modules. Even if you're not going to use something like Require.js, just put them in lots of files and concat and minify them. It's just not fun to have large JavaScript files. So those are just some of the kind of small issues you'll run into. And a solution is they came up with this thing called CommonJS to kind of look at some of these traditional issues, which was, I guess it was kind of a mailing list thing. I don't know much about how it got started, but basically it was just a bunch of guys that said, let's get together and create an ecosystem for JavaScript. Let's have a package management system, let's have modules, let's have all this just cool stuff. And out of that, they came up with the idea of some server-side modules, and this is kind of where Node is using. If you ever use Node.js, anybody ever use Node.js? So not too many people, but so the basic idea of Node is that you take JavaScript, since it's non-blocking I/O, and you run it on the client, or on the server rather. So you can just basically write JavaScript on the front end and on the back end, and it's really, really fun. And the way that you write modules with Node is that you use this kind of CommonJS syntax, which I'll show in the next slide. But the problem with, well, I'm just going to jump over here. So this is what a CommonJS module looks like. And the way that it works is you basically just say, if you have a dependency, that first line there says var lib equals require, and that just points to a folder. And that synchronously grabs the file, and it's immediately available on that lib variable. And that works great on the server, but the problem is in the browser, everything is asynchronous. You've used jQuery, you've used the callbacks, you've used $AJAX, and you know that you go get something and then you have a callback when it's loaded. So there was a lot of disagreement about how to handle that with this CommonJS module thing. So they had another module spec in CommonJS called transport C that eventually becomes AMD, asynchronous module definition. And so the AMD format, as the Require.js docs say, is a format that comes from wanting a module format that was better than today's write a bunch of script tags with implicit dependencies that you have to manually order. So that's kind of exactly what I was just saying, is that's just a fail. You just don't want to have to deal with managing dependencies in your HTML file. It's kind of a separation of concerns thing, and it's just difficult to deal with. So AMD, like I was saying, uses smaller modules, so you're able to almost get like a C# sort of feel and have actual kind of classes and whatever you need in smaller packages that you can distribute throughout your application and reuse them and test them, because you've got them all divided up. You know, you've got a person and the services and different things, all in different files and structured nicely. And all of this happens asynchronously, which is really nice. When you use, I didn't mention this before, but the way that script tags work if you put them in the head especially, your page won't load until all of your JavaScript is loaded, right? It blocks your page. So what you get with AMD and Require.js is that when you load in your scripts, the page loads, and then your JavaScript starts loading, which is very nice, because then your DOM is there and ready to go, and you don't have to worry about the page being blocked. And AMD also, well, it solves the dependency issue by basically saying that this module has dependencies on these modules. There's two functions that the AMD spec defines. One is called define and one is require. And Require.js also has this really awesome tool called R.js that does all of the concatenating and minifying for you. And it traces all your dependencies, and it's really awesome. So I'll get to that in a second here. So I want to take one step back for just a second, because a lot of people get hung up on the syntax of the Require.js modules and the AMD modules. But I want to kind of show a regular JavaScript module that maybe some of you have seen. This is called the revealing module pattern, and is it code? Can everybody read it back there? I know it's a little small. Okay.
Control plus.
Whoop. Or not. That actually is better. That's funny. Well, hopefully that'll be okay. Zooming in apparently didn't want to work. So what we've got here is we're setting up a variable here, and then we're doing this kind of weird thing where you see I've got this parenthesis here, and then these like weird parentheses down here. This is a pattern known as an immediately invoking function execution, I think is what it stands for. It's really long. Expression, yeah, that's what it is. Or a self-executing anonymous function. They kind of interchange. But basically what it means is, usually you just see the single curly braces and then no parentheses here. But what you can do, somebody figured out that if you add parentheses onto the end of a function like this, you'll cause it to immediately run. And what that means is you actually get a nice memory scope here, because anything that's inside of a function is scoped only to that function, right? So this thing here, the private, this literally becomes kind of like a private variable that you see in C#, because it's only available in the inside of this closure, this block of memory. And then what happens is anything that you return from this closure will get set up as the API for this variable. So get in the module here ends up having do it and do it now as functions available on it. And that's a traditional JavaScript module that you'll see quite often. And then in Require.js, it's very similar. So I just want to point that out. What you get with define with Require.js and AMD is you get this API where you can say define and give it an ID, which is optional, and then a list of dependencies, which is optional, and then a callback. And your callback is kind of the factory, is what they call it, for setting up what your module is going to do, which is just kind of like that module thing I just showed a second ago. With define, it's not an iffy. It's just a normal function. So in some ways, it's actually easier than with the revealing module pattern. No globals get exposed with a Require.js module. And the name of the module with Require, actually, this ID, this optional ID, when you're working with it in development, the name of the module ends up just being the file name, wherever it is in your file system. And the optimizer tool later adds the IDs in for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So you basically just say define, and then the dependencies, which I'll show in just a minute. So this eases in your development, makes it a lot easier. And you usually will only have one file or one module per file. So everything, like I said, is really nice and separated. And then, again, everything is private. So this looks almost exactly the same thing as that revealing module pattern, except it's just wrapped with this define. So, and I just point that out because that's kind of, at least when I got into it, it was a big barrier for me. It was like, what is this syntax? This is kind of weird. But it's just nothing but a way to say that I want this module to do whatever this returns, and that's it. So the way you do deal with dependencies with Require.js is that your first argument to your define call is an array of strings that point to your dependencies. Okay, and this is literally just the path to where your file is, and no JS on there because it's going to be JavaScript. It might not be. You can put a .js on there and then it would load it absolutely, but you don't need to. If you just say sum/module, that would just load sum/module.js. And the way it works, it's really nice, is that it loads this file and anything you have in this array asynchronously, boom, 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 and then they come back as whatever each module returns comes back in the arguments list. So for example, like if this one needed jQuery, I would just say jQuery here, and I get a $sign right here, right? And this is how you avoid the global problem, because when you're loading in your modules, they all come back as arguments here, and you're never putting anything on the window, unless you happen to load, like jQuery goes on the window because they just have to, I guess. And underscore does also. Some of them do. But if you do AMD right, you'll never expose global variables, which is a really cool thing. So this, and then what happens is this callback doesn't fire until all of the other dependencies have loaded.
I guess it doesn't matter which order you put stuff in that array.
Does it matter?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, because it's all asynchronous. They don't line up at all. And see what would happen is, like, if this module depended on jQuery, like it would load jQuery. It like sets up this whole tree thing, right? So, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's very interesting. You could put jQuery first, underscore back. It doesn't matter. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways of defining modules, and one of them is nice and easy with an object literal. So you can literally just set up an API and have some functions on it and just return them. That's one really simple way. This is one that has a dependency. Then you can also return a constructor. So in this case, this would kind of like be almost like a class. You could have like a person or a car or whatever as your constructor here, and you just return the constructor. So what this means is that if you happen to require this module in another module, what you'll be able to do is just say, you'd get it back here like this, and then you could say new sum module. And so you get a constructor that you can use anywhere in your application. And it's just the same thing as saying, function this, and then just saying new this, you know what I'm saying? But that's kind of cool. Like, some people don't realize that you can do that, but you can just return a constructor that you can create multiple instances of in your application. And then the other thing you can do is actually return an instance. So you can return a new of something. And this has some cool implications, because you'd think maybe that since it does this, that every time you required this module, it would give you a new one, but that's not the case. It actually gives you does the new one time. So you have actually the same instance throughout your application. So this is really handy if you have something where you want to work with local storage or some kind of in-memory storage, because you get one instance of this you can use everywhere in your application. It's all the same memory at that point. And then if you don't have any dependencies on your module, you can actually just say define and give it an object literal, and that's your module. So this is kind of cool. If you can even do like your configuration for your app. You can put like a config and just return key value pairs, or just functions, whatever. If it's that simple and it has no dependencies, you can just do this. Okay. So that was the define stuff, how you actually define modules. The other function that AMD exposes is called require. And what require does is it basically just grabs you some modules, whereas define is what you use to set them up. Require is just a way to go get them, just like that CommonJS example. The difference here is that you ask for your things you want to load in an array, however many you need, and then you get them back in this callback. It's just like the define in terms of that, but like I said before, since everything in the browser is async, you have to do it this way, because if this code is processing, the browser is going to say require this, and then it's just going to keep going. But this function here is going to fire whenever my app is loaded. Does that make sense? So, yeah, so it looks a lot like define, but all it does is just go get something. There's another way you can actually use the require call. Require.js does this really cool thing where if you want to, you could actually take a regular node.js module and use it with asynchronous module definition just by wrapping it with a define call. It's a little bit of magic, actually, but it's very neat the way it works. What they do is if you don't ask for dependencies or anything, and you just say function, and you ask for require as a callback here, what will happen is they do this toString on the function, and they manually use a regular expression, and they parse the function out. And see, this is just a normal require call here. There's no array here. So this is that synchronous looking style. And then they manually figure out what your dependencies are for you. This is really cool for Node developers. Like I've had this problem before where there's a Node module that I want to use in the browser. Well, it's really easy. I just wrap it with this define, and then you're good to go. So that's cool. You can actually share a module in your browser and on your server, which has some really interesting ramifications. If you have data models or data transfer objects, whatever, and you want them to be on the server and on the client, you can just wrap it with this define and you're done. You don't have to rewrite code, which is really nice. The basic way to set up Require.js is down here. It's very simple. Just point to wherever your require is. And then you use this HTML5 data attribute called data-main, and this is a convention. It has to be this. And what it points to is your kind of main module, which is just basically script/main.js. You don't have to have the extension again on there because it's going to be a JavaScript file. And it loads actually, this main sets up an important piece called the base URL. It's an implicit configuration variable here because Require basically needs to know where your relative place you're loading all your scripts is from. So wherever your main is referenced, that's where everything else will load relatively from, if that makes sense. So if it's in main, if your main is in script/main, in another module, if I just say define and then I say module A, it's going to load relative to this path, or to wherever this thing is located. It's just kind of a good thing to know. And then...
Can you give absolute paths as well to override?
Yes. If you put a .js extension on there, it'll automatically do it absolutely. And if you can also just put the path in as well. You can do // or // and then that would be like that, or just / however. So this right here is the main. So this is the thing that kind of bootstraps your app and gets you going. What you can do is you can do this thing require.config, and you can actually set up some aliases for your commonly used modules. So I can just say I want jQuery. Anytime I say define and I have jQuery as a dependency, it'll just give me this. Which I really like this because it makes it really easy to swap versions in and out. If I need to switch to jQuery 2 because I don't care about IE 6, 7, and 8 anymore, then I can just switch to jQuery 2 in one place in my main, and it changes everywhere in the app. And then also, if you have some long, like if I have templates or something, I can say, instead of saying app/view/template/whatever, I can alias it to whatever, which is a really nice feature. So this is what you'd see. You'd see the require.config, and then typically my favorite thing to do is to have an app object, and my app object is kind of responsible for loading the rest of my application. And that way I can kind of keep this main nice and clean. And then another thing I'll do sometimes for unit testing purposes is I'll wrap this with a, if not window.test or something, so that I can, yes?
I'm understanding you correctly, this would replace all of my script tags loading into the master page.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is. You're definitely right. It is very nice. So this might be what an app would look like here. My next slide here. Syntax highlighting is off a little here. That's okay. This is how I can use jQuery. You just ask for it as a dependency, and then it comes in here as $. Sean.
CDNs. Is this friendly at all to using CDN versions of this?
Yes, it's very cool actually. Let's see if my tubes will work here. I think it's in here. Let's see here. CDN. No, hold on. Let me just do the Google thing here. Require.js CDN. They have actually a really cool feature. Maybe the internet's not going to work. I was going to try and show you, but whatever. You can actually give it a CDN. I think the way it works is if you set it up as an array here, if you say jQuery array and then give it the CDN address and then have another element in the array that's local, it'll fall back, which is really nice. So you can point to your CDN, and if it doesn't load it, it goes to your local one. So it's there. I don't remember exactly what the syntax is. Here we go. I should have put that in there. It's a good thing that I need to get in there. Eventually that'll load and I'll show you. But yes, it is there.
But all these are just straight gets through the browser, so any caching is going to be hit. You're not going to get copies of your own as well as CDN cache JavaScript, because this is just going through HTTP.
Yeah, it's just HTTP. Yeah, I'll show in a minute how what it actually does with these. But it will just, if the CDN one's available, it'll get it and download it. So this is typically what I do, is I'll have an app module that's responsible for kind of kicking off the whole thing. So then I'll start getting my small modules here. So I'll load my index module, my about module, whatever, and then they come in as dependencies, and then you can run them or do whatever you need. So one thing that you'll run into is that not everything is AMD compliant. Not everybody doesn't use a thing that says define and gives it a module. Backbone and underscore are not AMD compliant. They don't set themselves up as modules. So if you try and use backbone and underscore in a Require.js app at first, it's just not going to work because they don't define themselves as modules. So when you try and load them in, they just don't have any concept of AMD. But some really smart kid wrote a plugin for Require.js that made it as a pull request in, and they set up this thing called a shim. And what this does is I can load non-AMD libraries by setting them up as a path here, and then in this shim config, I just reference the same alias, and I explicitly say backbone is dependent upon jQuery and underscore, and then what does backbone export itself as? And then Require.js goes in and it says, okay, well, I'll wrap backbone with the define so you don't have to do that. And when I was getting ready to try and convince my boss to use Require.js, this was before the shim was out, it was very hard to do to use Require with non-AMD libraries. We just had to give up on it, and it was just too much. This makes it so easy. It's really, really nice now. So I just basically say, here's my underscore is the exports this to the whatever, and then backbone is dependent upon it, and you're done. So it's all in one place, nice and easy. So don't be afraid to use it. If you want to use a library that doesn't do AMD, it's fine. Just do the shim, and you're good to go.
Is it part of Requirejs or is it separate, like plugin?
Now it's built in. That's what I was saying. Is somebody wrote it as a plugin originally, and then they liked it so much that they pulled it in. So the other thing that comes with Require.js is called the R.js optimizer, and it's a tool. Literally, it's called letter R.js. And what you can do with it is, if you're running Node on your box, you can run a command node R.js and give it a path right here, and you point to a build file, and it'll basically, well, I guess I'll just jump over to it. Whoops. Well, yeah, I'll show you that. It does all your uglifying for you, which is really handy dandy. Chuck Norris doesn't need to do it though, because his code is already minified when he writes it. So the app.build.js, you basically just tell it where your app is located. You tell it where you want your code to go, and then you explicitly have to give it that base URL. The base URL I was talking about earlier is implicit when you use the data-main, but this tool just needs to know where your base URL is, where all your modules are going to load relatively from. And then you give it your main, and then what it'll do is when you run it, it'll start at main, and it'll say, well, main needs jQuery, right? And it doesn't have any dependencies, but then it'll say main needs my index page, and my index page needs underscore, or my index page needs my utilities, and so then it creates this dependency tree and figures it all out and copies everything into a single file in order that it needs to be in, and then uglifies it and minifies it so that you get all of your code in a single file.
This is at runtime.
This is a tool that you run before.
Oh, okay.
You could, I guess, potentially do that. I don't know that I would do that, but you could if you wanted to. It's better probably. I use Grunt, which is a build tool, a JavaScript build tool, and I have a task set up, and I say grunt Require.js, and it just does this all for me. And then you could do something like linting, and then doing the Require.js thing and all that. Yeah, like I said, it runs in Node. It's really, really easy, and there's a lot of other things it can do too. That whole thing of wrapping CommonJS modules, there's actually a thing that you can do in it where you can give it a directory of Node modules and say r.js -- I don't remember what the command is, and it'll automatically wrap them all for you. It's an incredible tool. It really does a lot of things, and it does it very, very, very quickly. And that way you can avoid the whole having like 9,000 HTTP requests. It'll just take everything, smush it all into one file, and you're good to go, and uglify it. So again, he doesn't need to use it because he just writes his code minified. So that's Require.js. It is async, it is modular, and it is really, really awesome. So you should use it. I highly recommend it. Is there any questions so far about Require? Anyone have any questions about that? Okay, cool. So I'm going to jump over here, and I just have a brand new project called Intro here. Let's see if Parallel is going to work for me here, and we're just gonna do it real quick to do some Require stuff, just to kind of show you the setup. Okay, so it just starts like this. Source equals. So at least I think I already have it. Let me make sure I have it in here. Yep. So I've got Require here, and I've got r.js here. Okay. Scripts / Require.js. Boom. All right, and then I'm going to point to a data-main, and let's say this is going to be just called main. And then in here.
Can you increase the font size on the?
Oh yeah, I always forget to do that. Probably make this bigger too. No, stop. Make this bigger. And then what? Well, there's got to be a faster way to do this, but.
And you
Lower left hand corner of the editor.
Oh, is it over there now? Got it now. Is that better?
Cut off now.
God, that full screen is just killing me. Okay. Well, I guess I won't do full screen, and I'll just make it a little bigger. All right. Killing
The
me.
bottom part of it is there 100% on the editor, make it 150 or.
Yeah, it's still cut off.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Should we just a little bit?
There.
Yeah, it's not that.
It's not that.
No.
No, yeah.
See that little 100% down there?
It's something weird with
Left-hand
my
side.
Right here?
resolution
Yeah, make it
it's not
150.
letting
Oh,
us-
yeah, the zoom in,
I have no clue why.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I see file that we never spotted.
Am I running something right now? Okay. All right, and so now let's just add a new JavaScript file called main.js. And just say require.config, pass. I have to kind of do jQuery. Oh wait, what am I doing here? Okay, so we'll go jQuery, and it is jQuery -1.8.2, and again, I don't need to put JS on there. And that's how you set up jQuery as an alias. And so now for my main thing here, I'll just require jQuery. And I'll ask for a dependency. And we'll just, I don't know, we'll just put a H2 on the page, or H hello world. Obligatory hello world. Append to body. Oh God, I'm still not used to the shortcuts yet and parallels. This is my first Mac, so I'm not used to using that. All right, so Control S. There we go. All right. So in theory, I set everything up right, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work. So let's hope it does. All right. Go ahead and debug. Start a new instance.
So, couldn't you effectively, you could remove the scripts.render, the jQuery bundle you've got there?
I could. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually probably should do that too. Good point. I didn't even think about that. I just did a file new project earlier. And IE bug here. Let's see what I got. Have you guys seen IE11 yet? Anybody? Wait till you see this. Yeah, wait till you see this. This is the new IE dev tools, and it is much nicer. And that was the I'm running Windows 8.1 in here. Okay. Good grief, what am I missing? Unexpected token. Oh, that's that thing. All right, what am I doing wrong here? Let's see. So, let's get rid of this. Okay. All right. And then, here's my main. Dash main. All right. Oh, I hate that when you stop debugging or when you close IE. Did it work? What could I possibly be doing wrong here? Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. I do this all the time. It's script/main. There we go. I gotta get that alt tab thing. All right. There. So it's that easy. It's what I did there is I forgot to have scripts, but so now I've set up my base URL as relative to wherever my main is. That's why here in my main, I just say jQuery. So I could add another module here. Let's just say add a new JavaScript file. Call it home.js, and we'll just do a define, and we'll also ask for jQuery here, so that I get it as a function argument. $$ here, and we'll just do it again. $h3 this time. 3 foo h3 dot pin to body. And then now what I do is I come in here to my main, and I say that I also want home. And I don't have to put home.js, it's just home. Because that's the name of my module. The name of my module becomes that. So that would do this. Foo. And then, but the other thing you can do, like I was showing you, is home can return an API. So let's just give it return render function here. And so now I can move this into that. x3. And now in my main, when I get home here, I can say home.render. Right? And so that's kind of how you define an API for your module is by returning something back. Okay, so same thing. So that's just kind of really basic on how to use it. It's simple. It initially seems kind of like a little bit of a daunting task, but it's very nice. And you can see how I only had one script tag, and now everything just gets loaded in asynchronously after the page loads. So let me show you how nice is this inspect element now. So let me show you how this actually works with Require.js. You kind of were wanting to know how it downloads things. This is what it does right here. So you have your one script tag that you put in the HTML at the bottom or head or wherever you want, and then as you ask for things, Require.js just adds a new script tag with a couple of interesting attributes on it. One of them is async. This is actually a thing. Like if you go look at the spec, this is in there. It causes the script tag to load after the page renders. So you can actually go like read about that. And you can see, so here's my two things I've asked for. I've asked for main and home so far. So as you're working with all your different modules, they'll get added to the page after the page renders. So you'll end up seeing all your script tags right there. So it's kind of some magic, but that's what it's doing. So it's not as magical now. I've kind of revealed what's behind the curtain. But that's how it works. It's right there. So let me jump over to the slide again. Okay. So that's very basic. So now let's just kind of jump into how to use it with .NET MVC. So how many people use .NET MVC here? Oh wow, that's cool. Awesome. So you can actually install Require.js with NuGet. It's install package Require.js. I think it's actually supposed to be lowercase there. But anyway. What I do is that r.js goes in there as soon as you install it. And I typically move that out of the scripts and into the root folder because I don't really want r.js served. There's no reason to be able to go get it. So I typically just move it up the path. I wish that they kind of, when you install it, they didn't put it in the scripts directory, but they do. So I just move it myself usually. In this project, it is moved. I have it right here. So you can write, when you do file a new project with ASP.NET you're going to get multiple pages. And so do you guys typically do that with .NET MVC, or do you do single page apps? Is it multi-page where you do page refreshes? What's the kind of back and forth? Multi-page, exactly. Okay, so that's kind of the whole cool thing that, so with Require.js, most of the time when you use it, you're going to use a single page. It's going to feel kind of single pagey because when you do your dependency tracing, it's going to go and download all the things and have it available on every page, which is fine. But for multi-page apps, you don't really necessarily want all of the JavaScript files from your contact page where you've got validation on your home page. Because your home page to load slow, you need to load quickly. So I'm going to show you how to use it in both ways, single and multi-page. And also, I have a couple of just short little extensions I wrote that will help run that r.js tool in debug or release. If you run it in release, it'll run and do the optimization. So I'll kind of show that here in a second. It's very straightforward when doing a single page app. I added a custom HTML helper for it, and in a build step, like I was saying, for that release mode. But the drawback of the single page, like I was saying, is that all the things are loaded on every page. But I'll kind of show both ways, just so that you can see the difference. Okay, so in the single page application, let's go down here to my layout. I wrote this extension called html.require.js. And it's up here in my helpers folder. And basically all that it does is you point to a main. It's right here, and this is just relative to wherever you got it, and it'll render for you the script tag necessary for it. So it'll put your Require.js, and I mean this could get, you could definitely see this being a little bit more complicated. It's very straightforward right now, But the nice thing about doing it this way is that when I switch from debug to release mode, it will switch the location of where my JavaScript comes from with server side. So when I run my R.js tool, all of the scripts get copied into a build folder for you by R.js, which is really nice to kind of keep your build and your regular JavaScript separate. So with this helper, not only do you get the nice .Require.js thing, but then you also get this thing where you can specify where your built code is just by switching the release mode. And then the other thing with this is in my properties, I can't ever find them in here. That's right. Okay. Properties, please. I have a post build event that says if I'm in release mode, I want to run node, and I want to point it to that r.js thingy, and the output of it is going to, or the config file is located right here. So that's in my scripts folder, and here is all that. So here's my app build folder. So again, this is where my app is located relative to the build. Is just in the same file or same folder. Where I want this to go is to scripts-build, which is right here. And then the base URL is where I want everything to load relative to is just the scripts directory. So if I load a module, it'll just load relative to /scripts, right? And then my main config file is in is right here, and it's pretty much the same as the thing I just wrote a second ago. And then I have a little app here that is just, this is kind of the same thing as what the examples were doing before. So here's my mains and abouts and all that, and just basically doing some console logging to prove that it works. So let me spin this guy up here. Launch a new instance. Oh. This is Visual Studio 2013, also, by the way, and it's really nice. It's actually incredibly fast. So I installed that the other day. I really like it. And Parallels is really fast. Are there any Mac guys in here? Yeah, Parallels, I've been surprised at how well it works. This is my first Mac. I've always been a Windows guy. But I got one recently because I'm doing so much more web stuff, and I was like, I gotta have a Mac. Everybody was picking on me and making fun of me, so I had to get one. So I finally did. And I like it, but Windows runs really fast in it too, which is pretty cool. So here you can see that, after our first page, I guess. So everything's loading in. But again, since this is a single page app, everything loaded all on my one page, which it might be okay. If you don't have a lot of JavaScript, that might be fine. But you might want to not do that. So I'll show you that next. But again, you can see in the head how all of this happened, how all this magic stuff happened. Is it loaded the scripts right here? The rest of them are. I'm running the built one right now. I guess I switched it to release mode. Yeah. Oh, I didn't even realize I did that. So I guess I'll point that out now. There's my output here. Let's see. Oh darn, I was hoping it would show the. Oh, it didn't show it. Why did it not show it? It's supposed to show.
Drop down as a debug. Change the drop down.
No, yeah. I wanted. Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh no. Build. There. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. So when I ran my build a second ago, I forgot that I had left it in release mode, and it did that that optimized thing. And this is what the output of it looked like. You can see that it started at main, and it started tracing my dependencies down. See, I've got app, and I've got about, and index, and then it actually, as soon as you run it, it copies all of your scripts into your scripts build folder, so wherever you specified it as, and then it starts doing the tracing, and then minifies everything. And so you can see this is my dependency tree. So that's really, really cool. So now back here in IE, you can see that now I've only got one file where everything is loaded. And I did that just by switching my modes from debug to release. So I'll go back and show you what it looks like without that, just real quick. That was because of that post build step that I showed you a second ago. So let me now run it in debug mode. What time do I have to stop?
10.
10:45. Okay, cool. Plenty of time. Okay. Developer tools. And you see you got the, refresh again. Got the same stuff, but then now you can see that all of the scripts are, all here. You got the app, the index, and the about, all added after the page loaded. Nice and quick. Boom. Okay. So again, that's the single page app. Let's jump back in here and close this one and this one. And now I've got the MultiPage app. This is a little bit more complicated, and it's not bad, but it just took me a little while to get it right. But it works great now. So what I've got going on here is a slightly different approach. So in my layout, in my layout actually what I'm doing is I'm only asking for Require.js now. And then I'm using this section here on every page. So here in my index page on home, I'm using my section and I'm using my helper. But what I do with the multi-page one is I separate my main from the other page code. So that the use of that is like I have an app/common in my scripts directory. And what I do in here, this looks just like the main. And what I could do is if I know there's code that I need on every page, like jQuery or underscore or any of those kinds of things, then I can put that here. But in a lot of cases, I need to have different code on my home page than I do there. So now I have a second main just for my home page. So now this code, if I'm on my home page, will just run this one. So when I run this, oops, I wonder if I think that's my default project, so I think we're okay. All right. So now you can see that I'm on my home page and I'm just console logging the index. I don't have the about page code on my home page. So that's really nice. Now I kind of have everything separated. So you get the advantage of having the Require.js stuff in there, but then also you can have different code on each page. So if I go to my about page, you'll see that I've got my about code running now. Right? So it's really good. It's not too bad. I switched out the helper a little bit here. So the helper it still does the script build thing. I guess it's actually probably better to show you what it looks like rendered, because this looks really funky. So let's use source. So this is what the output of my helper does. So what I end up getting is, as long as I've got my require here, my section, when I use the HTML.Require.js and I give it those two arguments, it builds this for me. And I'm using that require thing, and I'm saying I want to load my common code first, and then I want to load the page module that I'm dealing with. So that's kind of a workaround. I don't know if it's a workaround. That's how you do it. This is how you could do multi-page apps with Require.js. It's a huge barrier sometimes for people using .NET MVC, because when you do file a new project, you're getting your 3 pages. So this helps you not have to worry about that. So it's really nice. Go back, and now you can do the same thing. Stop this, and switch it to release mode, and it will do the same thing where it will, let's see here, output. Try and pin this. Yep, no, too fast. Build. Okay, so again, it did the whole running, God, stop it. It did the whole dependency tree thing again. But now it's a little bit different looking because I've got index and I've got about. So back here, naive, everything is hunky-dory. So the other difference to get this to work is the build has to be slightly different. My app.build, So I'll show you that. Build.js. So the difference here between the single and the multi is that I have to kind of explicitly say to Require.js or to the r.js optimizer, all right, so I've got my app common module, and then I've got my index, and I've got my about. And I want to make sure that my common stuff doesn't get shoved in with my page level stuff. So that's the only other kind of wonky little configuration that you have to do to it. And then this kind of thing here, it's really weird, but I'll show you. Main. So in my common, with the multi-page one, like since I'm not using the data-main thing, I'm just using the Require.js script. I'm not setting a data main, so my base URL doesn't get set. So in my main, I'm explicitly setting it to make sure that when I load modules, they get relative to the scripts directory. So this is kind of this is how you have to do it, but that's why in my app.build, I have to go in and actually manually replace scripts with scripts-build. It's a little bit of magic, but it works, so I don't care. But that's just what that is. So if you ever go look at this code, that's what that's doing. But you shouldn't have to worry about it. My plan is eventually to put this all in NuGet so you can just install it and run it. I haven't gotten to that yet, but I'm hoping to do that at some point or another. I'm trying to think if there's anything else funky that this does, but I think that's pretty much it as far as the MVC stuff. So let me stop this. All right. Darn, my guy didn't load. Let me try the offline one. Stinking internets. All right. That was what I was supposed to show a second ago, but it didn't work. So multi-page, and that's it. So if there's any questions, you guys just let me know. And again, I'm jquery898 on Twitter, so I'd love to help you guys out if you have any Require.js questions. I love it, and I can't say enough about it. I will post that on Twitter, but it actually is, I'm using, Pen2 has a new product that we're working on called Blazon. And this is what I've been running in here. Obviously right now, this one right here is the online one, so the internet didn't work. But I will tweet that out here shortly. I'll get a short link. But actually, thank you for reminding me. I wanted to show you that real quick too. This presentation framework here I'm using is called Blazon, and it's an Pen2 product that we've been working on since about March, April time. And what's really neat about it is you saw the full screen mode. It didn't work on this stupid projector thing. But there's a couple really cool features. One is that when I resize this, it scales. So that's really, really nice, because when you're worried about resolution, you don't have to. It just works, boom, no matter where you are. The other thing is that there's this control panel here. When I pop it open, I can literally just add code to this thing, and it's all done in Markdown, new stuff. And then in a few seconds, if I have internet, it'll save. You can drag the slides around, reorder them. You can come in here to your settings, and you can publish it, keep it private. You can come into you can change the themes. So here I've got themes here, all this kind of cool stuff. I can customize it. I can change the syntax highlighting. You can even do your own custom colors, your own custom CSS. So I highly recommend trying it out. If you want, come up to me after. I've got some free private betas. This is just for DevLink, so come up and try it out. So yes, thank you for reminding me about that. It's a really cool product, and I'm super excited about it. We're kind of trying to make it the presentation framework for developers with the whole Markdown, and we're going to eventually have live coding in it, exercise mode, and all kinds of things. So.
Can that Visual project be available?
Yes, that is also available. I will also put that out. It is on GitHub already, and I will also put that out. Follow me on Twitter. Anybody else have any questions? Questions? All right.